Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervase Charmley. This is another church in Lancashire. This is one of the surviving examples, one of the best surviving examples of a Protestant Lancashire church. This is the old church of St John the Baptist, Pilling, and it was built in 1717. There was a previous chapel in the village. The village was a chapelry of Garstang, small town, well, Garstang's a funny place, one of these big Lancashire parishes anyway. But the old chapel was in an inconvenient place as to where the village had grown up in the period after the Middle Ages, really. So by 1700 it was felt that the old chapel was in the wrong place. And so a piece of land was given and a new chapel was built. And it's an incredibly simple building. It's four walls and a roof. This gallery here was added in 1813, so originally there was no gallery, and the windows on both sides were the same. Obviously the gallery means that the windows have to be changed on the north side. The north side, and I'm speaking here ecclesiastically more than anything else, but the north side would have had the pulpit about halfway down. And all this has been changed when the L-shaped gallery has been done. So there's a west gallery and a north gallery. Putting a gallery on the south side would have allowed the people in the galleries to hold hands across the aisle. And while possible, probably not very desirable. Well, this is the old church, as I say. There is a new church, and this is why the old church has survived, is that by 1880, the population of the parish had grown to such an extent that this old building was much too small. The new church is about 3 times the size. And so it's decided to replace the old church with a new church. And they did the sensible thing. As they were building the new church, they kept the old church going. And then, 1887, the new church is opened, and they have permission to pull down the old church. In fact, permission to pull down the old church was part of the permission to build the new one. So the church wardens had basically said, we've pulled down the old church. And of course they hadn't, so here it is. Well, come the 1980s, there was a problem, which was that they wanted to convey the old church, which had been looked after basically as a sort of funerary chapel. There's a mortuary chapel. They wanted to convey the old church to the Churches Conservation Trust, which then was the Redundant Churches Fund. The problem was legally, the old church didn't exist. It had been pulled down. So they wrote to the diocese, said, can we have permission to do this? And the diocese said, that building doesn't exist. And the folk here said, well, it actually does exist. And the diocese said, well, our records say, and of course legally that meant it didn't exist. So for 99 years, basically, this church didn't exist legally. Obviously, it does exist physically. Eventually, there was an order in council of basically special legislation passed, saying, yes, actually, Pilling Old Church does exist, and therefore it can be conserved. Mad, but that's the law for you. Well, let's have a look around at this very special building. It's not quite unique, but there are very, very few buildings left like this. As usual, then we start at the west end, and you can see here the way that the gallery partially impinges on the east window, which is a good sign that the gallery is a later addition. Behind me here is the font, which is this rather nice sort of wine glass chalice type shape. And there's a couple of box pews here. There was an organ, that's of course been removed, as have various bits and pieces. There was panelling, sort of day-day panelling on the walls, and that's been removed too. And that is the harmonium. That's the only instrument left there. That, I suspect, is the vestry, of what vestry there was. And we have here the commandments, so the 10 commandments up there, and then there's the creed and the Lord's Prayer further up. The pulpit was originally a 3-decker. It's been reduced to a 2-decker, probably when it was moved in 1813. There's some memorials here. See here, Benjamin Sykes, Maine, Singleton, who lived equally esteemed and respected in the character of husband, father and friend, who died 23rd of June 1856 in the 74th year of his age. This tablet is erected by his widow and surviving children. Got some nice cast iron tracery in the windows, and the other side we've got these leaded panes, because of course these are the original 1717 windows and these are 1813 windows. These benches here, see the open benches, these are the original seating 1717. The stove would originally have had a pipe coming out of it that may have exited through the ceiling but probably actually exited through the window. They did that sort of thing back then. The pipe has been removed. Makes the interior look a little less authentic but a little less messy as well. Now this is very, very much a Protestant building. This is a church then where you have the word and you have a communion table, not an altar, that is tucked away here. Now originally, as I say, the pulpit would probably have been about here. And so everything would have been facing the pulpit here, and the communion table, you'd turn to face the communion table only for communion. The pulpit, it's a two-decker, the bottom deck of the three-decker, the clerk's desk is gone, and obviously the top deck is the pulpit proper. That's where the preaching comes from. The royal arms dated 1719, so they're original to this building. And here we have the Lord's Prayer and the Apostles' Creed. You can probably hear that the acoustics here are wonderful, because this is a preaching building. It is designed for everyone to be able to hear the preacher. This is the bier. The bier. It's used, of course, to carry coffins. Every parish had one, and it was used to take people from their homes for burial, of course. That's been very much superseded now. You have more memorials and a table and the rails. And there, now that pew behind there probably would be the curate's pew, the minister's pew, because this would have been originally a curacy, it's a chapelry within the big parish of Garstang. And Garstang's very big, to the point, in fact, that there are now several churches built within it. So that is the interior. You can see here that L-shaped gallery, and there you've got that wooden screen there to prevent people getting drafts on back to their necks when the door is opened. And the gallery is now, so they were added in 1813. The minister at the time was a popular preacher, and he managed to, well, he attracted so many hearers, and the population was growing at the time, but he attracted so many hearers that they felt they needed a gallery to accommodate them. There's the gallery stairs, and very rustic, of course, very sort of basically like a farmhouse. It's like the stairs you'd have in your cottage if you were local. So here we go, up the gallery stairs, being very careful because they are relatively steep. And once we get out here, you can see immediately this is not a building that was designed to have a gallery. So these half-moon windows, these are the tops of the original windows, and they've been reused. You can see, I mean, I'm about 6 foot tall, and there's less than a foot between my head and the ceiling. The ceiling bows in the middle, yes, but that's not a sign of anything gone wrong. It's just buildings settle as they get older. And it's this flat ceiling that gives the building its acoustics. It means that the voice doesn't go up and get lost. These pegs, obviously, these are hat pegs. Men would bring their hats and hang them on their pegs. There we have the commandments, and you can just see at the top there we've got the Sun in Splendour with the Tetragrammaton, and again the date 1719, because all this is original. And this is the amazing thing about St. John's, is that so much of the original building survives. The pulpit is original, the commandment balls, the royal arms, all these are original to the building. You can see these, I'm going up here, you see these staples in the ceiling. That's where the chandeliers would have been hung from. Obviously there's no electric light here because the building was closed for public worship in 1887. And the interior is almost, not quite because some old panelling has been removed, but it's almost as it would have been in 1887 when it closed. In fact, it's practically as it was in 1813 when the gallery was opened. That's a church warden's box pew there, you can see. And because most of the seating here is box pews, the gallery seating would have been the more posh seating, apart from here. And these, I suspect, are the singers' pews. This is where the people who sang would have been seated. They would have led the singing. Had perhaps some people with their instruments, fiddle and bassoon, serpent and all these things, and they use those to accompany the worship. They'd have their music group. And of course today, organs having replaced music groups, and now music groups replacing organs, so what goes around comes around, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. The gallery, one reason with gallery churches, if you can get up in the gallery, do, because they tend to have the best views of the interior. I mean, look at that. This is unchanged, this view, for 200 years. This is what this church was like 200 years ago. Simple, very Protestant, very, to use a different terms, of low church interior. And this is what Anglican churches were like in 1813. The more Catholic medieval style, that comes in later. And we'll see that when we go to the new church. But first of all, we'll have a look around the outside of the old. And so this is the outside of Old St John's. You can see behind me these arch windows and the graveyard. Of course, the graveyard remained in use after the old church had closed, and the old church remained sort of used for storage and stuff, but preserved exactly as, or almost exactly as we see it today. It's a fantastic building, and as I say, it's really unusual, but it's really helpful to understand the difference between 18th century and early 19th century Anglican worship, and Anglican worship as it developed then in the second part of the 19th century with the influence of the Oxford movement. As I said in a previous video, Lancashire has this division. You're either a Protestant or a Catholic. And there's a lot of Roman Catholics here. A lot of the local big house families are recusants, that is to say they're Roman Catholics. The family have always been Catholic, they stayed Catholic at the Reformation. And that means you've got whole villages where the only place of worship is the Roman Catholic Church. And the Anglican churches then are Protestant churches, and they are a reformed worship, a worship that is formed by the Book of Common Prayer and the Bible. And that's what this building is. It's a Protestant church for a word-based worship. So let's look around the outside and point out some of the features of the building and indications of how it's changed, in fact, over time. 1717, of course, is particularly in rural Lancashire, and this is very rural. Even today, this part of the coastal plain north of the River Wyre is very rural, but in those days even more so. These days you've got Blackpool and such like to the south, but here you've got, but back in the day you didn't. And you can see here then that this building, the style might be even the sort of style we find in the 17th century. Now you can see there where the upper, above those windows, you've had stone added, you've had material added. You can just see there, see that corner there where the coins are white stone at the bottom, and then you've got 3 red stone coins. That is where the roof line has been changed to fit the gallery in. You can see the roof has always been this tall, the top of the roof has always been there, but originally the pitch was steeper. And that's why it looks a bit odd having this big gap between the windows and the roof, because it's been added to, and then of course you've got that extra window for the gallery there. The stone on this side, because this is the south side, this is the entrance front, it's very well-cut ashlar masonry. But here we come round to the east end, and you can see here it's a bit less posh. Now there is the new church in the background, and we'll go there. From the old we'll travel to the new, as they say. And there we are. The windows, reflection in the windows, and then there's the interior through there. Very nice. And there's the new church with its spire, which is quite a landmark, because we're here on the coastal plain. It's very flat. And here is the north side, and you can just see there, under that, well, between the bottom, the lower and upper windows, you can just see where the original windows have been cut off. The tops have been lifted up to make those semicircular half-moon type windows up there. So that is that. Very nice, most impressive. And again, these cast iron glazing. I just think what it made of cast iron, of course. And you've got this different, and it's rubble stone here because, of course, it's the bit that people don't see all the time. And this is the big graveyard. Of course, the graveyard's enormous now because the graveyard is where all the burials are. And there is the path between the old, there's a new church there, and then here is the old church. You can see here it's been rendered, probably the other side's been rendered as well, other than that entrance front. And you've got this nice little twin belfry there, a ding and a dong, because that's all you need. You're calling people to worship. You don't need to have lots of bells. And it's this simplicity of worship. It's a sort of building, again, it's that period when you can't really tell the difference between a Scots Presbyterian church and an Anglican church, because this might certainly a Scots Presbyterian kirk of the same period would look basically exactly the same on the outside. It's just that the interior layout would be slightly different. So this is this wonderful surviving, say, this very Protestant Church of England place of worship. And there it is. You see the window above the gallery, and there's the date on the door. We'll just go up to the door, because again, one of the earlier videos I've done here in Lancashire has been of over Wyresdale, and that door is very similar in style. Then above it, 1717, because that is when the church is built. And then above we have the sundial in shadow, unfortunately. Thus eternity approacheth, G. Holder, I think Holder, maybe Holden, 1766. And thus old St. John's Pilling, a unique building, and a building, as I say, that officially didn't exist for the best part of 100 years. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.